everybody doing today? We're going to get started with the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee, which is the governing board of our local continuum of care for people experiencing homelessness, ultimately with the goal of ending their homelessness. I'll call the roll to begin. I'm here, Lance Crawford is here, David Bartholomew.
Here.
Jamie Benshaw.
Here.
Sarah Copley.
Here.
Elvia Diaz.
Here.
Rick Freeman.
Here.
Claire Hubbard. Tricia Killian. Marcus Laws.
Here.
Dustin Mailman. Tim McElroy. Celeste Ordaway.
Here.
Joelle Steininger.
Here.
Jennifer Teague.
Here.
All right. First item is our May 11th meeting minutes. Does anybody want to make a motion related to those? Everybody have a chance to review them?
I'll make a motion to accept.
Remember to pull your microphone down, everybody.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Our community value for this month to think about and discuss if we need to is building trust through unity, collaboration, and justice. We've agreed that there will be meaningful communication and collaboration between leadership, providers, systems, people experiencing homelessness, and the community to create transparency and trust. I think I'll open it up for any discussion if anybody wants to say anything about that one. I'm sure we all still agree that that's a goal. Does it feel like we're making progress in that direction? Great, thank you. Which brings us to the Homeless Strategy Division updates. Emily?
Good morning. We have a handful of updates from our team this morning, most of which are not going to come from me, I'm happy to tell you. So Charles is going to kick us off with some data.
Good morning. The National Alliance to End Homelessness, which was the group that did this study for Buncombe County on homelessness, does an annual report called The State of Homelessness. And what they do is they're looking at the HUD data that's submitted through the PIT, the night of the PIT, and they also look at U.S. Census data for a bit. And what they're doing, excuse me, is trying to provide metrics that allow COCs to compare how their metrics look relative to the nation or to other COCs. So you get an idea of where we are in relation to other communities. This first set of metrics shows you the comparison that they are getting from the data that's being submitted for the state of homelessness on individuals, families, chronic individuals, and veterans. You can see nationally, 72% of those that were reported homeless were classified as individuals, whereas in Asheville, Buncombe County, 92% were classified in our data as individuals. For families nationally, that was 28% of reported homeless were families, whereas in Asheville, Buncombe, it was just 7%. Chronic individuals were reported nationally at 22%, with Asheville, Buncombe County at 33%. Veterans came in at 6%, whereas Asheville, Buncombe County came in at 24%, which of course, with our VA in the community, that would be a main contributing factor to that. Unaccompanied youth under 25 nationally is 5%, which pretty much matches what we have in Asheville and Buncombe. And unsheltered nationally is at 40%, and Asheville Buncombe's pretty close to the same at 36%. The National Alliance reported that homelessness has been on the rise since 2017. That's not particularly surprising to anyone involved in this issue, seeing an overall increase of 6% since 2017. In 2022, national counts of individuals and chronically homeless individuals reached record highs in the history of data collection on a national level. One thing I'll point out in your meeting notes, if you notice, there will be a link to the report. You can go there yourself. It's a interactive dashboard, and you can scroll down and select different types of metrics and look at North Carolina if you so choose, if you want to drill down to North Carolina. Another component is they look at race and gender, and this graph shows a comparison of how homelessness rated nationally for race and gender. Some of the key differences, you can see Black or African Americans nationally make up 37% of the homelessness reported, whereas in Asheville, Buncombe County is 19%. In terms of whites, nationally, 50% came in as homeless, whereas in Asheville, Buncombe County, 74% of what we reported were white. You can see that there's a slightly higher instance of women being homeless nationally than in Asheville, Buncombe, but there's a higher percentage of males in Asheville, Buncombe. So this is the last slide, and as I had mentioned, even though the homeless population increased, it increased slightly from 2020 to 2022, but veterans, youth, and families with children saw a decline nationally. In 2002, the nation's shelter capacity could only serve 55% of the unsheltered population due to bed shortages. And nationally, the top 3 forms of bed inventory are the following: permanent supportive housing, emergency shelter, and rapid rehousing. Rapid rehousing in particular has grown by 60% over the last 5 years. The National Alliance concluded that these forms of bed inventory indicate a national trend towards the housing first model as recommended by the National Alliance when they did our assessment for Buncombe County. The graphs below reflect the bed inventory trends in Buncombe County among HMIS participating agencies. The graph on the left gives you temporary housing bed inventory. You've got emergency shelter, transition housing, and they have a category called safe haven beds. There are no safe haven beds in Buncombe County, so that's why you'll see the blue line at the very bottom. But basically, emergency shelter and transition housing has had either a decrease or has stayed flat since 2020. However, on the graph on the right, you have permanent housing, which includes rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, and you can see there's been increases in all 3 of those. Finally, this is a metric where the Alliance referenced census data. They are looking at the pipeline of potential people at risk that can become homeless. That is not a metric that HUD tracks. Based on the U.S. Census data for 2022, an estimated 7.1 million American households were housing cost burdened, spending more than 50% of their income on housing. Approximately 3.7 million people across the country classified as doubling up in 2021. This number has been gradually decreasing since 2015. And doubling up is basically when individuals share housing for economic reasons. Are there any questions about this particular report? Yes.
2 thoughts. Do those numbers reflect a definition by HUD for homelessness? And then also, is it broken out by age? As far, I know the youth is represented, but for example, elderly or what have you.
So the data is primarily based on what COC submitted for the night of the pit. So it would be primarily HUD data that they're using to come to these metrics. And they do have some categories by ages. If you go to the dashboard, it does have some drill down options to look at that.
Thank you.
What is the definition of safe haven bed?
So a safe haven bed is, I have read, but I'm not going to try to recite it. Do you want to tell them?
Well, I can't recite it either, but it's not a bed type that we've had in our community for a very long time. Homeward Bound used to have those beds more than a decade ago, probably. Did you just pull up the definition?
Yeah. Just want to make sure I use the right words. Safe haven is defined as temporary housing that serves households experiencing homelessness who might be exceptionally hard to reach with severe mental illness and/or who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness and have been unable and or unwilling to participate in other types of temporary permanent housing and/or shelter.
Thank you.
The original application for the AHOPE Center included 6 safe haven beds. And they were operated until, I believe, around 2010 or 2011, which is, they were shifted to permanent supportive housing beds, as I recall, by Homeward Bound. And they are essentially high-access shelter beds for people with very strong needs. Jennifer.
To follow up to Jamie's question and wondering about next time, if we could see the information about the age breakdown, if that would be possible. I know that that continues to be a concern nationwide and locally regarding seeing more older adults who are unsheltered and unhoused.
Yes, that'd be fine. If there are no other questions, then I'll move on to our next item, which is what are called HMIS sharing agreements. There is the capacity for agencies within a COC to share their information, but currently our community services HMIS software is configured so that agencies basically can only see the data that they enter. We are exploring or wanting to explore with the agencies their interest in signing on to HMIS sharing agreement. As with any shared technology, you have to have standards that everybody follows. And so we need to see if agencies are comfortable with those standards and are willing to cooperate with that. And also there are implications for what clients are asked to sign, what the homeless are asked to sign in their release of information in terms of giving permission for their information to be shared with other agencies. If we expand sharing privileges, then it allows us to improve coordination of services between agencies. It makes the release of information reciprocal. So what that means is once a client signs a release of information, which is a somewhat involved process, it's not a 2-minute type of process, that ROI then is relevant for other agencies to also use so that when that client goes to the other agencies, they then do not have to go through that process again. And that saves time and redundancy for both the staff and the homeless person. It also allows us to strengthen our data quality if agencies can see each other's data. We do have a little bit of problem. HUD puts a big emphasis on entry and exit dates into different types of programs, and when a client is receiving services from different programs, sometimes our dates are overlapping, which HUD doesn't allow. And so then we have to clean it up. So if agencies are able to see who's been enrolled in what program, that may conflict with the program that they want to enroll the client in, then it gives us the ability to figure out what's going on at the time to make sure that they're capturing data correctly. This will require agencies to sign what is called a Sharing Qualified Service Organization Business Associate Agreement, or QSOBA. This is a legal document The framework for the legal wording in these documents, the release of information and the sharing QSOBA, come from MICA, the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness. They have an arrangement with NCHMIS, of which we are a member of, to provide technical assistance, like legal documents, the wording for legal documents. However, we still anticipate submitting these documents to the City of Asheville's legal department for them to review and make sure they don't have any concerns about it. Also, we will be meeting with agency execs for them to review these documents to make sure they don't have any concerns about what they look like. Once we've done this exploratory effort to see the level of interest, we will come back to the board, hopefully in July, and present our findings to you, asking for approval as to whether we should proceed or not. And if the board does vote to approve it, then we would start collecting signatures from the agencies that are going to sign up for this, conduct some trainings, and then our goal is to implement this by October 1st, because that is the start of the HUD year. And that's one of the recommendations that we got in terms of if a COC decides to implement sharing agreements, it's usually better for data and reporting purposes to execute it at the beginning of the HUD year. I don't know that there's any motion needed, but we wanted to make sure that at this point the board was aware that we are going to be approaching agencies and asking them about their level of interest and reviewing the documents with them.
Any questions or concerns, Jim?
To be clear on the ROI, is it only going to be other agencies that add information into HMIS, or would it potentially be available to any other service provider that may touch or support these individuals? And that would be a great opportunity to go ahead and have a release sign when someone's in front of them.
So the way that they've structured the ROI, that Mike has structured the ROI, is definitely we are saying HMIS participating agencies will be able to see the data they collect on you. However, there are other providers in the community that are not HMIS agencies that we try to coordinate your care with, and therefore we are asking permission to allow us to work with those agencies as well. But they are not going to actually have access to HMIS. It would only be through conferences and caseworking calls where information would be shared.
And so will those agencies be explicitly listed out, like the types of agencies that this information could be shared with on that ROI?
That is one of the issues that we're struggling a little bit with, is how the wording exactly should look, and how generic, because there is advice that you can't have a generic ROI that says you can share it with anybody that you think you want to involve. At the same time, it's going to be difficult to list all possible providers that will be involved in the care of a given homeless person. So I think that we're going to try to find a balance between those that are most likely to be involved in case conferences. Beyond that, I think we're going to have to see what the city legal department says about that.
Thank you.
I think the name of the document is too short. I think we should add.
It's almost like the VI spit at.
Yeah.
I've got a question. It's kind of like maybe three that are related. How long has HMIS sharing been available as a thing to do? What percentage of COCs across the HUD universe actually participate within those COCs? What percentage of their providers do? And is there any metrics on improved services as a result thereof? I'm thinking of how you sell this, because it's work, and everybody's worried about privacy these days, so I was just wondering if there's some background information we could be pointed to. Thanks.
I can say that the information I have at this point, most COCs in North Carolina are utilizing sharing agreements at some level. You do have one exception where ABCCM, their SSVF program, crosses multiple COCs across part of the state, And so there is visibility of, for instance, our data, the SSVF program in Mecklenburg County can see our data, but that's, the reason for that is because that is a program that is federally funded, and it's the same program across all counties. And so therefore, there is not a sharing agreement in place for those particular projects. Because it's, the clients do sign an ROI, but because it's essentially the same agency and the same program across multiple COCs, then the sharing agreement would not be needed. In terms of the ability to measure whether it makes an impact, I think that's a good question. At this point, I don't have that.
I'll just add that I think it's a large part of the purpose of HMIS and the utility of HMIS is for agencies to be able to coordinate services with each other to best serve the person that they're both working with. And I think there is a lot of interest in our community from conversations that we've had for many years with providers about how valuable that would be to be able to share information and collaborate more effectively. And I think we are, most COCs across the country have some form of data sharing in place, again, because it does positively impact the people that we're trying to serve.
And makes less work for the agencies.
And means that the person who's in crisis and seeking services doesn't have to tell their tale over and over and over again. So it really is a supportive move for people who, are needing emergent help and don't need to repeat the same information to different parties.
Did that answer
Yeah,
most of your questions?
So I understand we don't have to have any vote today, but will we be provided an example of what this ROI would look like at the next meeting? Okay.
Any other questions?
I would just comment that there is a lot of precedent with other populations in doing this, even in Buncombe County with the Juvenile Crime Prevention Council, the JJTC, so that treatment continuum, it's hugely beneficial. So I'm really excited to see we're taking this step, and I think there's some data with other populations around how this supports RAP services and coordination.
All right. Debbie?
Hi, you guys. So I wanted to share a little bit about our training and capacity building work that we're doing on our team. As part of my role as training and development, I'm going to be working to develop this annual training calendar and training plan. And so part of the purpose of those trainings are to build capacity to cover a few areas. We want to increase provider capacity and knowledge in supporting people experiencing homelessness. So we're going to look at best practices and how to, increase